You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman. Have you ever wanted a pet raccoon? You think their masks and their little human-like hands are just so cute? Well, here is a possible sign that that dream might be slowly approaching. A new study published in the journal Frontiers in Zoology suggests raccoons are getting closer to domestication. To be clear, there's a lot more research required. The study is not definitive yet. In the meantime, you can hold on to your hope for a little rocket or bandit or, whatever in your pet future. But this has to do with a new study where researchers observed a shorter snout on the animals. So Marina Wang is here with me now. She's a freelance journalist based in Victoria, BC, and she reported on the study for Scientific American. Marina, thank you very much for being here to talk about raccoons with me.
I'm delighted. We love raccoons.
We all love raccoons in the Pacific Northwest, right?
Yeah.
Some of us maybe more than others. But actually, I should say my dog is protesting this segment because he definitely does not enjoy raccoons when they show up in the backyard. So, Marina, we are still very far away from widely treating these animals like we do companion cats and dogs, snuggling them, hanging out on the couch. But this is a really fascinating bit of research that you reported on, and it has to do with how the raccoons are changing physically based on where they live. Can you tell me more about what these researchers found?
Yeah, so these researchers looked at pictures of 20,000 raccoons across the United States, and they found that raccoons living in urban environments had slightly shorter snouts than their rural cousins. And those slightly shorter snouts, it's a trait that's part of something called domestication syndrome. So scientists, as far back as Darwin, have observed that domesticated animals have a series of physical traits, things like smaller faces and heads and floppy ears. Some of them have spots or curly tails. They found that domesticated animals tend to have these traits compared to their wild cousins. So one of these traits showing up in raccoons is kind of indicative that they're in the early stages of domestication.
I'm so curious about why snouts would have something to do with domestication. And I know you also have talked to a researcher that was involved with the prior relationship, looking at the prior relationship between certain cells that are associated with the shorter snouts that also are connected to domestication. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, so researchers, like I said, researchers have noticed that these series of physical traits in animals for a long time, but they didn't really have a way to explain it until relatively recently. So in 2014, some scientists published a paper that connected domestication syndrome to something called the neural crest cells. So in early embryonic development, the neural crest cells, they kind of form along the embryo's back. And during development, they travel to other parts of the body, and they're kind of the precursor cells to other types of tissue like cartilage and bone. They affect pigmentation and coloring, and they also affect what will later become the fear response in an animal. So animals that are more tame have a dampened fear response. They're not as flighty or afraid of humans.
And that's important because when they're kind of hanging out with humans and if they're really reactive, they're not going to be successful, right? So it's like, if I'm summarizing this correctly, it's kind of like the shorter snouts are associated with fear response in animals. And so it's not necessarily that the snouts themselves being shorter makes them more successful in like a domesticated environment. It's more like the snouts occur along with a bunch of other traits, which include this dampened fear response. Am I summarizing
Yeah.
that close to right?
Yeah, if you think of it kind of in reverse, like the dampened fear response or tameness is associated with a bunch of these physical traits like short snouts.
Yeah. So there's a really large part of my brain that is incredibly excited about this idea of like maybe someday the raccoons will be our good pals. There's also a big part of me going like, are we overblowing this? What do you think? What is this tell us, or what did you hear from researchers about the possibility of future raccoon domestication, like in the real world?
That's a little tricky to say. I mean, I think anyone can kind of kidnap a raccoon and put it on a leash, but that's not really what kind of the evolution of domestication is all about. So people sometimes think of domestication as humans like taking animals and selectively breeding them, but the domestication process naturally happens a lot earlier than that. So humans leave trash and our food scraps everywhere we always have. And that's like a big bounty of food for wild animals. So animals that can evolve to be more tame and less fearful around humans have that evolutionary advantage. So that's kind of the stage that these raccoons are at.
It's driven by the animals, is basically what you're saying. The domestication process starts with the animals rather than with people.
The domestication process starts more with natural selection and with the animals than with people.
So you also spoke with an expert who was involved with the neural crest cell research, that they weren't involved in this study on raccoons. But what did he make of this new research looking at the shortening snouts of urban raccoons?
Yeah, so he said that these shortening snouts are consistent with his hypothesis. Similar findings have been found in, I think, foxes and mice. So yeah, it supports his hypothesis. It doesn't support the hypothesis definitively. It's just like a piece of evidence to support it. I think in order to really prove this hypothesis, they would have to find the genes responsible, and that is something that still needs to be done.
If raccoons are truly on the path to domestication, did you hear from anybody about other characteristics that they might develop or other milestones that we might someday notice?
Yeah, so the researchers are thinking of looking at hormones. So, if this domestication syndrome thing is happening in raccoons, then they could also possibly have lower levels of stress when being around humans. So they could just like trap urban versus rural raccoons and take a look at their hormones.
Marina Wang is a freelance science journalist based in Victoria, British Columbia. Okay, Marina, I'm going to put you on the spot. Are you excited about the idea of someday raccoons becoming pets? Is that something that that you would be into?
In theory, yes. In practice, probably not.
I mean, I think it's going to split our audience. Personally, we're a long way away, but I think the idea could split our audience for sure. But this is a really fascinating data point. Before we go, do you have any more questions as we think about the future of raccoons and the future of domestication research? Anything that you haven't answered yet here in the course of your reporting?
I think it would be really, really cool if scientists could find the genes responsible for, domestication syndrome. I think the researchers were also thinking about doing the same kind of study in opossums and armadillos, and that would be really interesting to, see more species that are showing early stages of domestication.
Okay, more to explore here for sure when it comes to raccoons. Marina Wang is a freelance journalist based in Victoria, BC. She's been talking with us about a new study on the snout length of urban versus rural raccoons. The urban raccoon snout length is shortening, and these scientists are saying that it could be a milestone along the way to domestication. And Marina is based in Victoria, British Columbia, and she reported for Scientific American. Marina, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Libby.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime right here online at KUOW.org, or of course on your favorite podcast app.